Hello everyone. Now that I've been living in Thailand for about 3 weeks, excluding quarantine, I thought it would be a good time to sit down and talk about what I've learned since being here. So let's get to it. And first thing I learned is about language barriers and how tough they are. Before coming here, I knew that the language barrier would be my toughest challenge, but I didn't realize how tough it was going to be. I'm in a town where few people speak English, and it is essential to know some Thai to be able to order food and ask for help, etc. I do know a little Thai, but I didn't realize how intimidating and nerve-wracking it would be talking to the Thai locals. When I speak with my mom in Thai or my other Thai relatives, I'm able to understand and communicate with simple sentences, but when talking to a local, they're talking fast, and they typically assume that I can speak the language fluently, especially when they learn that I am half Thai. I know out west that if only a single parent speaks the foreign language, it is not super common for the children to pick it up, but here in Thailand, that concept is hard to grasp. People are very confused when they find out that I don't speak fluent Thai. And I can't help but feel like I'm letting them down by not being able to communicate effectively. During my first week, I was so anxious about ordering food that I wanted to even skip meals sometimes. The fear of not being understood was overbearing. And I thought to myself, oh wow, I finally know what it's like to be a foreigner in Canada. Until I realized how dumb of a statement that was. Maybe I have a glimpse of the foreigner experience out west, but our experiences remain vastly different. I've come to Thailand as a privileged English-speaking white person. This is so different from the experience of foreigners moving to the US or Canada who are forced to assimilate to Western culture. I really cannot compare the isolation I feel to theirs. Let me elaborate on this a little more. Foreigners moving to Canada are primarily moving there for a better life or more opportunities. I am here in Thailand to teach Thai people English, to participate in a cultural exchange. I am wanted here because of my native language. And although, yes, I feel isolated being a primary English speaker, I am wanted here for that reason. And I'm sure not all Thai people want me here, but that is my purpose being here. So really, I cannot compare my experience. Because of my native tongue, I'm able to live and work here in Thailand, getting paid more than double some of my Thai colleagues, which is pretty messed up, and leads us to my next lesson learned, which is on passport privilege. This is a term I recently learned from the agency OEG that brought me over here to Thailand. I have a passport privilege because I'm very easily able to get a visa, come here to Thailand, and live and work here as a teacher, having zero teaching qualifications and experience. It's really not so easy to be able to leave your country and travel and have all these opportunities in other countries compared to how it is for us Westerners. Individuals from other countries, such as Thailand, have a much harder time getting a passport, getting a visa, or even having the funds to travel, let alone be able to practice their profession in a foreign country. All of these differences just because of where we were born, which is crazy. And as much as I want to say, oh, this is such a great opportunity, and it certainly is, it just feels like such an unfair world that just because of where I was born, I have all of these privileges, whereas other countries do not. But I guess the world is unfair, but it's just like, it's sad. It's sad that we don't have the same opportunities. Big thing I've learned since moving to Thailand is that there is a greater openness to the LGBTQ community than I had anticipated. Thai culture is very conservative and traditional. You know, female teachers, we have to wear skirts to school. The female students have to have their hair a certain way, and they have to wear skirts as well. And there's just all these like gender differences that are implemented. And to me, this indicated they wanted to distinguish the genders boldly or distinctly. But as I've lived here these past couple weeks, I've been surprised by the amount of fluid gender expression, as well as the openness talking about homosexuality. It is so unexpected, but fantastic seeing how normalized being queer is here, specifically being trans. And I think a reason there might be a greater openness to it is because in Buddhism, they actually recognize transgenders. There is a caveat though. It certainly seems that there's a great openness and acceptance of the LGBTQ community, but when I did some more research, I learned that at the legal level, that is not the case. Transgender people cannot legally change their gender on official government documents, and same-sex couples do not have the same rights as opposite-sex couples. So there's still certainly a lot of reform that needs to happen here, but it is so contradictory to the vibes I get living here, which I thought is very interesting. Another thing I've learned while being here is about motorcycle safety, or the lack thereof. It's funny because I'm watching YouTube videos about riding motorbikes and motorcycles, and they're made out west, and they talk about all the safety aspects, all the safety gear that you need to, to safely ride a motorbike. And they say, oh, you need to cover your whole body with clothes, make sure all your skin is covered, wear boots, helmet, gloves. But then being here, you see people riding their motorbikes in sandals, shorts, t-shirts. Like, that's so common without a helmet. People piling on 3 to 4 people on a single motorbike. It's quite bizarre and different from out west. And although it is legally required to wear a helmet here, you don't really see it that much. So it's interesting just comparing it to the west. But even though it is certainly dangerous to ride a motorbike here, there is double the amount of motorbikes than there are cars, and in some way I think that makes it safer because there's so many of us riding here versus out in Canada. You'll have maybe a couple motorcycles on the road. Like, you don't see it as nearly as often, but here it's just so many, and people know how to drive with motorbikes because it's just so common. So although it is certainly dangerous, and I wouldn't really, I'm learning to ride because it's hard to get around in my area without a motorbike, but it's certainly dangerous, but I think in some ways it is safer here than Canada, which kind of sounds crazy to say, but there's so many motorbikes here and people know how to drive with motorbikes. So in some ways I do feel a little safer driving a motorbike here than I would in Canada, where you're not going to run into many motorbikes. Okay, I'm back in my apartment. My last lesson or thing I've learned I wanted to talk about didn't get filmed. I must have not pressed the record button, and I'm just realizing it now that I'm editing the video. So I'm going to quickly go over it now. So the last thing I've learned since being here in Thailand is not really specific to Thailand, but I wouldn't have learned it if I didn't move here and if it weren't for my passport privilege, really. And that is that online teaching sucks. I've been teaching online since I've gotten here, and 90% of the time it feels like I'm talking to a wall. None of my students turn on their cameras, except for my last class where I had one girl turn on her camera. Shout out Punch, I appreciate you. But yeah, no one turns on their camera. Participation is, the kids can be okay, but just not seeing faces, I find it's very hard to gauge the response to the lesson and how students are responding and reacting to it, which I think is very difficult for me to know how the lesson is going. It's also difficult planning activities. You can't do the same sort of group activities you can do in person. So that's something I learned. I mean, I always kind of knew online teaching sucks, being a student, but now that I have been on the other side of online teaching as a teacher, it just frustrates me even more, and I really hope we can move back in person soon. But really, after this experience, it makes me wish I had turned on my camera more during my online classes in my last year of university. I get it from the student perspective. No one wants to turn on their camera, especially if no other students are turning on their camera. But after experiencing the side of the teacher, talking to a bunch of blank screens, it's just, I wish I had turned it on more. So that's something I've learned. So this wraps up the end of my video on what I've learned since moving to Thailand. There is a lot more I could have added, but I wanted to make it a bit concise and perhaps do a video like this in the future after I've been living here a bit longer. But yeah, if there's anything specific you want to hear me talk about or you want to see me do or explore while in Thailand, please let me know in my comments, and thank you for watching.